Hello, this is David Wilcock, and you are listening to a Divine Cosmos audio blog. Today's date is October 10th, 2009. I recently was on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory. This was Tuesday of this past week, and we discussed some very enlightening information that has come to my attention recently. Specifically, you may or may not be aware of the truth behind the UFO phenomenon. This is something that seems to be reaching critical mass, and there are many people in the mainstream media who are now coming forward with their accounts and with their stories. My personal contribution to this is also going to include a sci-fi documentary that's going to be coming out on that network as of November the 8th on a Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a 2-hour special, and I can honestly say that I gave my very best information on this special. There's a lot of the special that's devoted to my testimony, and this is going to be probably some of the most substantial information ever to be released in mainstream media of its type. What we're talking about in a show like this is the idea that our entire solar system is actually experiencing climate change. This is not strictly an effect relegated to planet Earth, and it's not obviously being caused by global warming or industrial pollution. Instead, what we seem to be seeing is a solar system-wide phenomenon which includes a very unusual amount of behavior we're seeing with the sun. However, the conventional explanations to try to blame this on some sort of Planet X or extrasolar body that swings by and is thus causing these effects is really quite a naive perspective in my opinion. As point of fact, the Sun contains 99.86% of all the mass in the solar system, and therefore that means that all the planets combined only account for 0.14% of the total mass of the solar system. That means that they're really like grains of sand by comparison to the size of the entire solar system. So when you start thinking about it in those terms, it becomes really difficult to imagine how one tiny little planet could actually be causing the sun itself to have such spectacular climate change that it's at an all-time high in its activity, unlike anything we've seen in literally 11,000 years. What's far more likely is that we are moving into a new zone of energy in the galaxy, or rather, to be even more precise, a new zone of energy is moving towards us from the center of the galaxy as it expands away from the center. And it is now intruding into the pathway that our solar system is traveling through. This may seem to be a fanciful notion, but you can go on my website, divinecosmos.com, and watch a video that I did recently at the Project Camelot Awake and Aware conference here in Los Angeles. I titled the video 2012 Return to Camelot, and within a few more days we're going to have a new version of that video up there with more than one camera angle at a higher level of quality. The point is that if you watch this video, you will clearly see how I am describing these galactic energy fields in very concrete and measurable terms. What I'm saying to you is that the galaxy really is creating waves of energy that ripple away from the center of the galaxy, much like ripples from a stone dropped into a pond. And as these ripples enter into our solar system, they are on a superficial level causing things like the planets to become brighter, for their temperatures to increase, for there to be sudden increases in their magnetic field strength. We're seeing atmospheres appearing on planets that didn't have them before. We're seeing a lot of ozone and charged particles, which is really the sun's attempt to throw off all of the particles that it's taking in. So I would like to point out that it is only a superficial level to look at it as interplanetary climate change, and on a deeper level, what you're actually seeing is the harmonics of human consciousness changing. Now, what do I mean by that? When you really understand how energy works in the universe, you'll begin to see that electromagnetism is not the fundamental substrate that the universe is built off of. That's a misnomer based on conventional physics from Einstein and others like him. However, there is a whole extra field of physics called torsion field physics that comes primarily out of Russia. And in this new physics, we're seeing that there is a energy that is actually responsible for all atoms and molecules to be built on the quantum level. This is not an energy that you can measure directly because it is not contained within our own 3 dimensions of space. That means that we're dealing with a hyperdimensional energy force, an energy that operates within its own reference frame, which from our vantage point is not directly anything we can touch or see or smell or taste or otherwise. However, it is the energy that makes matter, and obviously we can see matter. On an esoteric level, you can take it to a much higher vantage point by seeing that the consciousness is the builder of this energy. The energy itself is consciousness. Recently we had an interview with a whistleblower named Dr. Pete Peterson, who has worked for various covert black ops projects on a variety of technologies. His perspective is that it's the informational field, as he calls it, and it is not localized within time. He also differentiates between that and the field that we have as our aura, which he calls the consciousness field, and says that the consciousness field is what actually processes the data from the informational field and makes it so that we can experience it in time. On a very intrinsic level, all of this new science shows us that the mind is only superficially located in the brain. There's only certain aspects of your consciousness that are essentially driven by the body that are actually going to be a direct result of the neural system, as you would think of it. In a greater sense, the brain is also a conduit for energy which is non-local, and that's actually where most of your consciousness is taking place. There's a wide variety of scientific experiments and data that prove that this is what's going on. And the tour de force where I explain all of this is in a product that I have on my website called The Science of Peace. And what I did is to put a musical background with my colleague and friend Larry Sire to this lecture, which is approximately a little over 3 hours long, broken up into 3 sections, each of which is an MP3 file. Anyway, the point is that this consciousness field, or informational field, is all around us, and if you go back to the ancient esoteric traditions, we see that in fact it is well known that all the universe is ultimately created by one mind. Therefore, if you can approach and identify yourself as being one with this universal mind, then a great deal of sorrow and pain and difficulty can be let go of. The simple fact of the matter is that we are all spirits having a human experience. And as we move through each layer of our awakening process, we're coming more and more into contact with who we really are underneath the veil and behind the mask. So as we see this, as we see ourselves in a grander context, we can start doing away with all the ego-driven feelings of lack and scarcity and need and fear that drive our minds and drive our bodies through so many of the same issues that keep repeating themselves over and over again. We have pain and we have sorrow and we have longing and we have difficulty and we have suffering. And these are not awful, terrible things that are thrust upon us by a cruel and unloving universe. These are our gifts. These are our blessings. And they come to us specifically because they are what we need to awaken to our true identity. Behind all of those superficial levels of the self, there is a primordial self, which is actually the whole universe as one singular consciousness. That's the way it's always been, and it's always going to be that way. And when you investigate what esoteric science is telling us, you see that the universe itself is a dream. None of this is really here. All of it is some form of distortion of one intelligent supercreator, one intelligence which is much, much vaster than we could ever conceptualize. Just to even begin to understand how far this can go, think about how every person on Earth could ultimately be unified in one consciousness, so that there is one mind that is simultaneously aware of what everyone is thinking about and feeling. So there are going to be people in all different states of consciousness. There's going to be people having a good time, people having a bad time. everything you can imagine is going